What are some of the challenges? You talked about the WNBA being in a different stage in the NBA and its growth. I mean, I think obviously the NBA has a significant head start on the WNBA in terms of popularity and all that. What are some of the challenges? Is it access? Is it things like this that you think are holding the league back? What do you think are some of the obstacles that they're facing in their growth?
Yeah, so just, bare bones, the WNBA is about 50 years younger than the NBA. And in terms of where the NBA was at this point in its growth, like viewership numbers are fairly similar. Attendance is even more than what the NBA had. Obviously, population sizes are bigger, like that factors into it. So it's not a apples to apples comparison. But considering where the NBA was, like the WNBA is not altogether in a different space than a 27-year-old NBA. But with all of the potential, access points that the WNBA could have right now, I just don't think it's taking advantage of all of them. Like for one, the media rights deal that the WNBA currently has, I think significantly undervalues the league. It doesn't put it on, television in the most advantageous situations. Like, you have playoffs competing against the NFL Sundays, which is never going to work out very well for anybody, let alone the WNBA. Like the NBA
doesn't matter
shies
what the
away
sport
from
is,
competing against the NFL, right? So that's part of it. I think just getting in better TV windows would help. I also think that, the WNBA was kind of scared off by the recession in like the late 2000s when a lot of the league teams had to shut down, and it stayed at this size of 12 for about, I think, 15 years right now. And you look at similarly, so I compare it a lot to the MLS because the MLS started in the same year as the WNBA, and the MLS is about to hit 32 teams, I think, and the WNBA is still at 12. And the MLS has decided that the way for it to make money is through expansion fees. And the WNBA is completely cutting off that source of income by refusing to expand to more teams. And you have this problem where the college game is getting more and more popular, has always been more popular than the WNBA because you have these built-in fan bases. It's a product that exists all across the country, not just in 12 markets. And then you follow your favorite college players, and most of them cannot make the league because there's just not enough space. So you're losing an opportunity to expand to more markets. You're not capturing the college fan base, and then you're not getting these expansion fees. So I think those are all of these things that the league wants to have like a sustainable business model in its first 12 teams before expanding. But I think a lot of the problems that it faces could be resolved by adding more teams. I think about the NWSL even, like it's 10 years old. It already has 12 teams. It's supposed to expand to 16 within 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, women's soccer has a different, imagination in the U.S. than women's basketball does. But I do think that there are lessons to be had, from just having a larger footprint across the United States. And WNBA just kind of feels stuck the longer it stays at 12. And then I guess just one last thing is, like, the WNBA is a very socially progressive league. We had this situation in 2000 where, 2020, during the WNBA bubble season, where the Atlanta Dream, backed a senatorial candidate from Georgia who was running against the owner of their team, right? And so they backed, Reverend Warnock ahead of their owner, Kelly Loeffler. And it's just the kind of thing where the WNBA takes social issues, very seriously. They dedicated that season to the justice for Breonna Taylor. But I wonder if sometimes the WNBA, its messaging focuses so much on what it does other than basketball that we're ignoring the fact that, hey, this is just a really cool basketball product. That's how we're supposed to be marketing it, as a basketball product. And maybe we focus too much on the other things.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think on the...
Yeah, sorry, I went a little long.
No, it's great. I mean, I think on the issue of expansion, I think that's a great point. The growth is the way to grow. It sounds pretty simple, right? I understand that you do want to be sustainable and things like that, but there's so many huge media markets that just don't have a team, that are probably crying out for a team. There's the Bay Area doesn't have one, Philadelphia, Miami, right? There's some other ones I'm sure I'm missing, I'm leaving off, but just like you said with MLS, they found out that people will pay a ton of money to own a professional sports team. And same with the NWSL. They're having incredible success in LA with Angel City. I know the Sparks are already in LA, but I think that success can be replicated in some of these other markets. Has there been any talk about expansion to some of these, some of the biggest metro areas in the U.S.?
Well, that's the thing. Expansion is always a talking point. And it's almost doing a disservice because the more we talk about expansion without it happening, it's like the boy who cried wolf when the commissioner says, like, we've whittled down like a list of 100 cities to 20 and then to 10. And oh no, now we're visiting 20 cities again. There just hasn't been consistent messaging about what the league wants to do with regards to expansion. And at this point, fans are just getting a little like, let me know when it actually happens, you know?
Sure. Yeah, and the other thing you mentioned about there just not being enough teams. I mean, I've been reading about first round picks getting cut in their second year just because there isn't enough roster spots. I mean, is that a potential solution? Maybe expanding a roster spot, having some kind of developmental league, a G League type for the WNBA as opposed to having, full on professional franchises. Is that something that's been discussed?
Yeah, a lot of coaches and players that I've talked to have talked about the idea of like a taxi squad, maybe 3 players who aren't necessarily paid a full salary, but who get to practice with the team, who get to work out with the team, who, have been to training camp, know the system. So when like a player goes out, you can bring them up, and then it's like a nice developmental pathway so that, if like, let's say you're a first round pick who gets cut in training camp, you don't play your rookie year right out of college. It's really hard to find your way back into the league, like, because you're already behind all the players who are on the rosters, and then the next draft class comes in, and how do you distinguish yourself from them because they're on cheaper rookie contracts and like more team control and yada, yada, yada. So it's just so hard to be a developmental player in this league unless you're in the perfect situation, right? Like New York is carrying 1 rookie. Las Vegas is carrying 1 rookie, right? A lot of these, like, and who knows if these players will even be able to make the roster the next year when salaries come a little higher for their existing veterans, and now we have to, shuffle some things around. So it's just really hard to be a young player in this league if you're not immediately contributing, because then you're just seen as like this dispensable roster spot. And I do think that, I don't know if the WNBA has the infrastructure for like a full-on G League. There was some talks about maybe like having a coexisting like 3x3 league where, each franchise sort of operates its own 3-on-3 team, and then like people are still playing and they're still around franchise, and then maybe you can tap into that system if you need players when, you have injuries and whatnot. But the idea of expanding roster sizes is definitely something that has gained a lot of momentum. Over at The Athletic, we did a anonymous player poll of, players around the league, got about a third of the league. And we asked the question of, would you rather have expanded roster sizes or more teams? And the majority said expanded roster sizes, because we're in the situation where, like, you're only allowed to carry 12 players max. A lot of teams only carry 11 because they don't have the salary cap flexibility to carry 12. So if you lose 2 players to injury, all of a sudden you can't even run 5-on-5 in practice. And like that is just not a good way of running practices when you are a WNBA team. So yeah, I think any way to get more people in the building for the WNBA is a good thing, whether that's more teams, whether that's bigger roster sizes. I personally think both need to happen, but it's all being discussed. It's just a very slow pathway to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both of those are great paths, either the expansion of the league or the roster sizes. I didn't know that they only carry 12 because of those salary cap restrictions. I know the salary cap has become a point of contention as well. I mean, if I remember correctly, Mark Davis, the owner of the Aces, was in some hot water for trying to circumvent the salary cap. And, there's the issue of the chartered flights and things like that. I mean, do you see these as obstacles as well, or are they just potential opportunities to improve the league?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that the WNBA does with the theory of retaining competitive balance across the league. So if certain owners are unable to pay for charter flights for their teams for all games, we're going to institute a prohibition on charter flights for all teams. What Mark Davis does is actually what he was alleged to have done, and what the Aces were eventually required to forfeit a first-round pick for, was something that every team is not allowed to do. Like, if you sign a contract with a team, they're not allowed to pay you more beyond the contract, right? Like, that's just something that exists at any level of any professional sports. I'm sure because of the compensation that WNBA players are making, that there are deals all around the league, for like, if you sign here, we'll make sure you get an endorsement by such and such, and like technically that's illegal. I personally don't care. I just want the players to get paid. Like, they perform incredibly well at their jobs. They deserve to get more money. One of the things that, gets discussed, like the WNBA pay gap gets discussed a lot, like relative to the NBA. And like, I'm not super interested in that number. It's just the revenue that the WNBA makes. The players don't get an equal share of that as they do in the NBA. And so I understand players wanting to get more money, even if it's like in fuzzy ways. I don't particularly care one way about that or the other. But yeah, the WNBA says that it's instituting all these measures for competitive balance, but there are all these other ways that competitive balance doesn't exist in the league, right? Like there are better coaches, there are better players, there are better practice facilities, there are larger performance staffs. So to, hold the line at these one or two specific things seems very silly to me. And I think if you want to move the league forward, then you have to let certain teams bring it forward and then see who will come along with them. And either they will or they'll fall behind and they have to sell.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like in the NBA, right? I mean, obviously there is that competitive balance, a salary cap, whatever, but, there's owners that are willing to exceed and deal with the luxury tax. There's owners that'll spend, a couple $100 million on a state-of-the-art practice facility, and some that want their guys to practice in like a high school gym or something.